listening to WTMFI 67.42 FM Chicago.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in to WTMFI 67.42 FM Chicago. I'm TJ Fanpool, also aka Turbo TJ. This is my weekly live talking about my Star Wars facts of the week. So I'm just getting started. Welcome in. Sorry, I didn't see everybody in. Obi-Wan, thanks for stopping in. Josie, Victor, thanks for coming in. Sorry, I didn't react right away. I was having some technical difficulties there at the start. So this is my weekly recap of my Star Wars facts of the day. So let's see. So starting off, let's go back through a few things. I started facts of the day about 2 weeks ago, and it's been going really good so far. I keep updating the facts each week, and it's a variant on different things for Star Wars, not an overall global subject, but I'm just basically popping in stuff that I have interest in. Recap on me. I am a diehard Star Wars fan. I've been a Star Wars fan since I was born. Basically because when Star Wars came out in 1977, my parents took me to the movie theater and showed it to me. I was still in diapers, and I watched the whole movie with them. Growing up, my parents got a hold of the copies of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. I watched both of them religiously on a regular basis. Of course, because I'm Gen X, my parents were baby boomers. Actually, mostly silent generation baby boomers that were right on the cusp. So yeah, they basically used a lot of movies and TV as partial babysitters while they were upstairs. We were down in our basement, and me and my sisters, we would watch the movies and stuff like that. I always had Star Wars on because it was my favorite, so I always watched it. Maurice, welcome in. So thanks for stopping by. To go into a few more things, I'm probably going to finish this up, and then I'm also going to go live again tonight. So I'm just going to do 2 lives. Depends on how things go. So Star Wars has always been a big passion project for me. I grew up watching Star Wars as a kid, and then when Star Wars wasn't available, I read the books of the expanded universe. So anything that started out from Splinter of a Mind's Eye, The Adventures of Han Solo, Lando Calrissian Adventures, and then, of course, the comic books that came out. I didn't read so much of Star Wars original run because Star Wars had an entire line of non-canon Star Wars comic books that they did from basically the 1970s all the way through until I want to say 1985. It might have been earlier. I'd have to double check them. I do believe they have all of those comics on Marvel's Comics Unlimited. So if you guys wanted to read the original Marvel comics that they did, they had a completely non-canon story that they were running, where they basically, filled in a lot of the spaces that were left open by Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. So if you guys want to check those out, they're actually decent. Cal, welcome in. Loro, welcome in. And so in addition to that, I also started reading a lot of the comic books and stuff that started coming out because George Lucas came out with Shadows of the Empire, and Timothy Zahn came out with the Heir to the Empire series, which is Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and Last Command. And then there was a whole bunch of novels that started coming out after that. There was Truce of Bakura, and I want to say there was the Han Solo arc that was done. There was the X-Wing novels that were done. I mean, there was an entire run that was done with the expanded universe, not to mention all the video games that came out. I mean, you had Star Wars Battlefront. You had, of course, the Super Star Wars games that were out for Super Nintendo. Casper, welcome in. Big Bird, welcome in. So there was a lot that came out for Star Wars during the time period between the prequels and the originals. And, of course, a lot of you, I'm sure, saw when they re-released the original 3 in an expanded, remastered format, which I personally loved. That was the first time I'd actually gotten to see Star Wars in the theater since Return of the Jedi. So I was big into that. So Star Wars has really been part of my life for most of my childhood, right up until my teens and in college. So I've been a Star Wars fan for longer than most. And not to mention, I also had to deal with the bullying that came along with that because, being any kind of a nerd, even a Star Wars nerd, even though there was a huge fandom. Plumber, welcome in. Isaac, welcome in. There was a lot of people who really did not get into Star Wars beyond the child aspect. I mean, they got into sports and stuff like that. So it was viewed in a nerd culture. So still, there was the stuff that was involved with that. But I stuck by Star Wars regardless. I mean, I was into it well through high school and college. So that's just my personal experience on it. So that was the way it went. And I continued on with Star Wars, nonstop. I never gave up on it. I kept following it the entire time. And it's honestly, I haven't regretted following it that way. It's been, a great experience for myself. I've absolutely loved it. And even though I've had, the frustrations of I mean, there's so much that you can get into about Star Wars. It's beyond just, the simple aspects of the movies, but the TV shows, the graphic novels, the comics. There's so much about Star Wars to love that you can't just nail it down to just one thing, And everybody has their opinion about the expanded universe, and of course, the prequels, the sequels, the original trilogy. Me personally, I'm a person who loves Star Wars in general. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's bad or good. I mean, I love it all together. And I've watched pretty much everything by Star Wars, this is my only thing that I have not watched and I choose not to watch because I don't want the air screwed up by it, is the original holiday special that was done that had the original cast and was the first appearance of Boba Fett, that you can actually watch the animation from it on Disney Plus. I have chosen not to watch that, even though I've had more than enough opportunities to watch it. I have chosen to abstain from that, mainly because I haven't felt the urge to watch it. And even though everybody says you kind of have to watch it, even though it's supposedly terrible, I've chosen just to abstain from it altogether. Which I know some people will hold that against me for that, but honestly, that's just my personal opinion on it. I still love every aspect of Star Wars. And recently, with the facts that I've been going through this past week, I actually went back online and started watching a lot of the React videos because, Brandley, welcome in. Gearshift, welcome in. I really love watching the React videos on YouTube and stuff like that of people reacting to Star Wars, because that is something that I never thought to actually do for myself, is to record my reactions. But I really connect with a lot of the people that do that because their reactions are so close to mine. So it's really a plus for me to get to listen and watch people react to Star Wars, because I feel like I'm watching friends sitting in the same room with me watching it. And I'm sure there's a bunch of you who actually get the same feeling when you're sitting there, you're watching like the React videos, you feel, and they're reacting the exact same way you do. And some people watch it just to, point out that they didn't catch certain things. And there's plenty of fans out there who have not watched or seen or read everything. So a lot of the stuff flies over their head. But there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have a problem with people not having watched everything or seen everything, because then that gives me something to talk to them about, I mean, you get to actually sit and have a conversation with someone and say, yeah, this whole thing about the Darksaber and where it originally came from, that the guy was a Jedi, and he was a Mandalorian. It's like, wait a minute, there was a Mandalorian Jedi? It's like, yeah, there was a Mandalorian Jedi. There was this whole guy that did this whole thing and all this. And I love that aspect, especially when I get to introduce someone to Star Wars. The last thing I want to do is discourage them. I never want to discourage people from loving Star Wars. Donald, welcome in. It's such a gift to get to talk to someone about Star Wars and to see their eyes kind of light up when they realize that there's something that they didn't know, but now that they're excited about it. I mean, I absolutely love that. I mean, it's wonderful to get to experience that kind of thing where you get to talk to someone and allow them to experience Star Wars for the first time in a unique kind of way. So that's just my personal thing on that. So I absolutely love that about Star Wars, that it's never one thing. You can expand on so many different things. I mean, there's so many people. DeathX, welcome in. You can talk about, the High Republic, where the Jedi were first in. You can talk about the underworld of Star Wars. You can talk about the Jedi. You can talk about the Sith. You can talk about the Night Sisters, Mandalorians, the Mon Calamari, the Corellians, the Alderaanians. I mean, there's so many aspects of Star Wars that you can get into. The Elders of Mortis. I mean, there's no end to the amount of stuff you can talk about. Richie, welcome in. Or Richita, sorry. Sorry for if I have mispronounced any of your names, if you come in, I apologize for that. I'm not the best with linguists and stuff like that. So, all right, we're about 10 minutes in. I've gone through my whole intro spiel. Let's get into the facts. So, first and foremost, for Monday, the very first fact of the week, Star Wars. Fact of the day. Kyber crystals are rare. Force-attuned crystals that act as the heart of a lightsaber And sorry, I'm trying to get my I'm trying to get my notes up. I had my notes up and now I've lost them. Hang on 1 second here. Bugger. I might have to hold on 1 second. I've got to actually exit out of this because I think I screwed myself up here. I tend to do this sometimes. There it is. Okay, I had my notes for reading through stuff. I literally was talking to a friend about this, is that I have a tendency to lose my place with my notes, so I need to have something standing by. Okay, crystals are a rare force attuned, focus plasma energy into a blade. Large amounts of kyber crystals were used in the creation of the Death Star's main weapon. Because of kyber crystals' rareness in the Star Wars universe, there are very few planets that the crystals naturally form on. In the past, during the high time of the Republic and the Jedi, they were only able to be found by Jedi who had been trained. I just screwed myself up there. They were only able to be found by Jedi who had gone through the proper training to actually feel the kyber crystals that were calling to them. They were actually calling to them through a force. So they had to gain a level of Padawan level in order for it to see it. In order to create the lightsaber itself, the Padawans had to actually obtain specific metal pieces that they had to collect in order to actually build the saber. There wasn't a set amount of parts that were specifically for Jedi hilts that the kyber crystals went in. They actually, usually, the Padawans would pick them out just in their daily life. It's this weird thing. And this was something that was brought up in the novel Ahsoka. When she was reassembling her lightsabers, she would find pieces around somewhere and she would collect them. And she would eventually use those parts to create her lightsabers. And this, I thought, was one of the coolest things that they actually did, was that the Jedi, naturally, it was like almost like, just a sense through the Force that they were actually able to assemble their lightsabers, because there was no manual for creating their lightsabers. They went into this in Clone Wars, where Dr. Huyang, who we see in both Clone Wars and in the Ahsoka Season 1, where he was actually there to help the younglings and the Padawans figure out how to actually build their lightsabers. And he had some spare parts that were sitting around because the kids either picked up something that wasn't exact right or they were still missing pieces. And he would have an entire collection. You actually saw this on the ship, both in Ahsoka and in the Clone Wars, that he had little bits and spare parts that would allow the younglings and the Padawans to finish building their lightsabers. The Empire was able to develop the hilt technology, but on a larger scale, mostly because, of course, you had Palpatine, Vader, and all the Inquisitors who were building their own lightsabers, and the information about the lightsabers was stolen from the Jedi Temple by the Empire when the Jedi were exterminated. So they were able to develop the hilt technology on a larger scale for the crystals to be used in large quantities, and create a weapon capable of destroying large planetary cities, outposts, starships, or an entire planet. Now, this we saw, if you guys remember, from the Andor television series. If you haven't had a chance to watch it on Disney Plus, I highly recommend it. If you want more details, you can read the Andor comic books that were actually done, and there's online stuff. You can look a lot of this stuff up on Wikipedia.com. I do a lot of my research through Wikipedia, as well as other online sources, like Disney has their own, and there's a bunch of others. But you get a lot more when you watch some of the stuff. The whole thing about that Filoni and Disney have done is that they basically say that the TV shows and the movies are the best way to find out what's canon and what isn't. Mauro, welcome in. I see someone else came in. Unfortunately, I can't read the symbols that are your name. I apologize for that. I don't have the translator turned on. So, but in Andor, and I'm not going to spoil the details for this, but you do get to see how they actually are doing things to actually create the materials that allow the weapon to actually work the way it works. But basically, in theory, in an aspect, no one has actually said this. It's mostly a fan theory that they've come up with, that the Death Star, its weapon, is literally a giant lightsaber. And that's the reason why it's extended out as long as it is. That's what the whole system is designed for, is to basically extend. That's the reason why. And you might not notice this unless you're actually, paying attention, but it's something that a lot of people don't even notice, is that it's put out as one solid beam, and it's a projection basically. So they take the plasma, but they only put out enough so that actually it impacts and is absorbed, which is the reason why it explodes. So if you go into the actual physics of how it works, is they're emitting the blade, and you don't fully get the understanding of this because a lot of the times you see the image come out, but you don't see what happens to the beam itself, and you kind of get a view of this. Gabbage Goof, welcome. Thank you so much for the rose. Thank you. You notice that when it extends out, it then goes back in. I mean, it happens only for a flash. You see the weapon come out and it kind of cuts off, but only enough energy goes out that actually allows it to destroy the particular target. Now, there's a theory that among the fans, they haven't gone into it in shows and stuff like that, that the systems that are on the Death Star are specifically designed so the target, they only release enough energy to destroy the target itself. That's why they specify what is being destroyed and how they want it to be destroyed, so that way they understand the system basically is put in so that it only destroys a single ship, it destroys a city, or it destroys an entire planet. That's the reason why it's able to be so exact, and the beam doesn't go flying through the planet and continues on. It only releases enough energy to do the damage that it actually is designed to do. Peabody Mason, welcome in. So that's one of the really cool facts that I really liked about the whole thing about the Death Star and the way the kyber crystals work with that. I thought that was so cool in the design of that and how it works. I mean, that's the reason why I wanted to do a fact about it, is that a lot of people just think it's just a big weapon and stuff like that. There's a lot more involved. Hi, Mr. Body Mason. Welcome in. So, all right. So, fact number 2 for the week. Star Wars fact of the day. Jedi obtained the kyber crystals for their lightsabers by hearing the crystal calling to the Jedi through the Force. Sith obtained kyber crystals by bleeding them with hate, which is why their lightsabers are red. Now, I actually included a picture of this on there where you can actually see the bleeding process. And in the Marvel Star Wars Darth Vader, they actually go into real detail about how the bleeding process is actually done. After a Jedi, Padawan, or youngling reaches a specific level of training, they must take part in a trial on a planet where kyber crystals grow. To obtain the crystal, they'll be used to construct their lightsaber. Now, there's 2 or 3 primary planets where you can actually find the kyber crystals, and one of them was I'm actually blanking on the names right now. Ilum. Ilum was the first one. That was the planet that was actually used in the Star Wars Clone Wars, which was the primary world for where they were getting their crystals. But there was also, as we learned in the Star Wars movie Rogue One, you actually find out that there were kyber crystals on the planet of Jeddah, and they were actually able to be obtained from the temple. And you find out that there were other Jedi temples throughout the galaxy. There was one on Lothal, and that's where Ezra is able to get his kyber crystal. And there are different kyber crystals that are available around the galaxy, but it's very rare to find one beyond the planets where they primarily grew. That's the reason why, for those of you who have watched the sequel movies, the Star Killer base that is featured, that is held by the First Order, that is the planet Ilum, that used to be the planet where the kyber crystals were formed from. And this is something that is brought up in several movies and video games, is going to Ilum. I believe it was Jedi Fallen Order, the video game there, as well as Clone Wars, that the Empire actually goes there and takes over the planet. And this is primarily done for 2 reasons. One, for the Empire to start harnessing the kyber crystals, which you actually see that being done in the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, that they actually start harvesting the crystals there. And the Sith obtain kyber crystals through an altered trial by their master, because as we learn in the prequels, that there are only 2 Sith. There's the master and then there's the apprentice. And we see this a lot. Barbara, welcome in. that we see this throughout the entire series run. And a common rite of passage involves for Sith hunting down a Jedi, killing them, and taking their crystal. Alternatively, a Sith disciple could steal a crystal from one of the planets that is, they basically just go onto the planet, they find a kyber crystal, and they just steal it. So they don't have to defeat a Jedi, though the majority of the time, a acolyte would have to defeat a Jedi in order to obtain one of the kyber crystals. Once a Sith obtains a kyber crystal, then they go through the process that's called bleeding the crystal. Now, bleeding the crystal, before it could be used in a lightsaber, this basically is, instead of attuning to it, the Sith has to overcome and dominate the crystal with negative emotions. So basically they take, you know how the Jedi use wisdom and calm and all that in order to, whereas the Sith have hate, fear, anger. They force those into the crystal itself. They basically fight the will of the crystal to the point where it turns blood red, where they're basically converting the kyber crystal over to the red form that they need in order to form a red lightsaber. So it's really an intense kind of a thing. If you get a chance to read Marvel's Star Wars Darth Vader, you actually see the process that Darth Vader has to go through in order to get that kyber crystal to actually turn red. And we see this a little bit. If you guys saw the Disney Plus series Star Wars Acolyte, you do see an aspect of the bleeding process. They kind of do it on a smaller scale, but I think the reason why they did it the way they did is to emphasize the strength of the person and the hate they were feeling. So there's a lot of that goes into it. Now, this is one of the few things about the kyber crystals that I thought was super duper cool, and it's brought up in the Ahsoka, both the Ahsoka Season 1 series, the Clone Wars, Rebels, and the Ahsoka book. If you get a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. Mainly because Ashley, who does the voice of Ahsoka in the Clone Wars and all this stuff, she actually does the voiceover for the book. So it's so good. But a Jedi can achieve a skill by taking a kyber crystal of a defeated Sith and purifying the crystal from the bleeding process. This results in the lightsaber forming a color of pure white. And anybody who's seen Ahsoka in Star Wars Rebels and the Ahsoka series, she has white lightsabers. Oh, also Mandalorian. Sorry, I almost forgot about that. You actually get to see Blueberry, welcome in. Real, welcome in. You actually get to see Ahsoka wielding dual white lightsabers. Now, the reason why she's able to do this, and you can pretty much figure this out, she actually, if you've seen the Tales of the Jedi, you see where Ahsoka gets her kyber crystals to form those lightsabers. If you, there's two ways you can learn about this. It's either Spider-Man, David Kroger, welcome in. You can either read the Ahsoka novel, or you can watch Tales of the Jedi. It's on Disney Plus, and they actually show that Ahsoka takes on one of the Inquisitors without a lightsaber. She literally faces them without a lightsaber, only the Force as her ally, and she is able to defeat them. And then not only defeat them, but take the lightsaber and execute that Inquisitor herself using the red lightsaber, which is the example of a Jedi being able to defeat a Sith without actually having to use their own lightsaber, which is really goes to see Ahsoka's level of achievement in her abilities. Just Chill, welcome in. Juliana, welcome in. That she actually has taken herself to a new level in regards to her skill as a Jedi, that she is able to convert a blood red kyber crystal into a white lightsaber. And the fact that she not only did it once, she did it twice in order to create her two lightsabers. Now, it's a cool fact that she actually picks up, and I highly recommend reading the Ahsoka novel because there is so much more detail that goes into of why she's on that planet and what happens afterwards. Now, granted, because of the Tales of the Jedi short, that story has kind of been decanonized and retconned, But the basic story is still there, and they haven't technically completely retconned that book. So there's a lot more that goes into what happened to Ahsoka during the time between when she left with Rex and she went out on her own and she went into hiding. So there's a lot more there that you want to say. Kylo Ren failed to bleed his lightsaber. That is absolutely, I believe that is actually true. I will have to look that up myself. That's good. Thank you, OBE, for putting that up, because that's actually a fact I didn't know. So I will have to look into that. I haven't gone into so much detail on the sequels. You know, I know what I know from watching the movies, but I haven't gone into full detail on that. A lot of my stuff is original trilogy and before. So I haven't gone into all of the stuff in the sequel series, so I will definitely have to research that one, but I will definitely look that up. So OBE, thank you for bringing that up. I will definitely look into that. So, but I highly recommend any of you that are interested in learning more about the Kyber crystals, highly recommend watching Star Wars Clone Wars. You can actually look up on Wikipedia which episodes specifically focus on them. You can also, there's plenty of information on Wikipedia.com for all the details about Star Wars and the Kyber crystals. The majority of the information I went on Wikipedia and other websites. I researched this to make sure my facts were actually true. I don't just put up the stuff because it's the stuff that I know for myself. I actually researched it, figured it out for myself, and learned it, because that's the only way to really get these facts right. Spooderman, Jayon, so many of you are coming in. I'm sorry if I don't say hi to you. User, welcome in. Okay, we're going to move on to the next fact. This is the next fact for the week. Star Wars fact of the day. This is the beginning of my run on The Mandalorians. I did 3 days on this. I will come back and do more, because there's so much on the Mandalorians, so much on Kyber crystals and the Jedi and stuff. So I am, just because I covered it once does not mean I will not come back to it. There's so much to take in. Alexander Ramos, welcome in. So Star Wars fact of the day. Mandalorians come from the planet Mandalore. They are well known throughout the galaxy as skilled warriors and bounty hunters. Their culture is one of the oldest in the galaxy, but they were not always a warrior culture. Additional facts. Mandalore has a long history in the Star Wars galaxy. By the current canon of Disney, Mandalore is as old as the founding of the Old Republic, but not as old as the foundation of the Jedi Order. The Jedi Order actually predates Mandalore coming into its full being. Now, that's not to say that people didn't exist on Mandalore. They just hadn't advanced to a level that they could go beyond the planet's surface. But the Mandalorians did exist and became a part of the expanded galaxy around the same time of the founding of the Old Republic. Mandalore's warrior culture has been in place from the origins of the planet, as in their warrior culture was there from the very beginning. Rockcat, welcome in. Honor and war has been a part of their way of life for generations. The most notable significance about Mandalorian culture is the development of their technology in relation to armor and weapons. Now, they did develop their own ships and able to achieve light speed capability on their own. This is one of those planets where they went through generation after generation of war and culture based around that, but were able to develop the technology beyond to create the culture they did. Though the Mandalorian culture has gone through generations of war from exterior and interior threats, Mandalore has endured the most traumatic of histories, including near extinction. Yet Mandalorians have survived and continue on into history. Now, for those of you who have not seen everything that has to do with Mandalore, there is a long extended history with Mandalore. And it's one of the few species of the Star Wars universe that they did not go into a lot of detail from the get-go. We didn't even know about Mandalorians until Boba Fett came on the scene back when he first showed up in Empire Strikes Back. He was the very first Mandalorian of any type that we were introduced to. And beyond that, we didn't even know Mandalore existed. I mean, when you think about what a lot of fans went through with Star Wars, you did not find out about all of the species and stuff like Starry Night, welcome in. Angel, welcome in. you didn't find out about all the different planets and species and stuff like that because a lot of them weren't even introduced that way. The only way you found out about who someone was and what species they were was when you actually got the figures or read the stories on the comic books or the lunch boxes and stuff like that. I mean, I was a kid. I didn't even know what a lot of the creatures were called. Like some characters, their species was just called what their name was. Like there was an actual figure called Weequay, but that was the actual name of the species eventually. And there's a lot of that came through. You didn't even know about all the different ones. So Mandalorians, you found out about that originally for me was through the EU novels and the books and stuff that came out during the time between Return of the Jedi and the prequels. You know, that time in the 1980s and 90s where Star Wars pretty much wrapped up, you found out about the other species through the books and the comics. I mean, a lot of that wasn't even listed. I mean, heck, you didn't even find out what Mandalore was until they really started going into Boba Fett and Jango Fett and their history. So there was a lot of stuff that was not available to fans like me during the 90s and right up until when the sequels or the prequels came out. So you really found out a lot about this from the books and stuff like that. And there were so many books that came out that you finally started getting the whole story behind what Mandalore was. But it was all based off of Boba Fett. And then when the prequels came out, you had Jango Fett. You found out he was Boba Fett's father. And you didn't know that. That was never even brought up in the books and stuff like that until the prequels came out. So that was a huge thing for a lot of us fans. We did not find out about what the Mandalorians were until the EU. So even though people dismiss the EU and the legends and stuff like that, that was the primary source for the majority of Star Wars information, was through that venue. Granted, now a lot of that information is no longer canon, but a lot of the details about that is a little mixed in with the current canon. Like if you went back and actually read all the stuff about Mandalorians, a lot of that is technically not canon. I mean, if you go on Wikipedia.com, there is a lot of detail there, but not all of it is canon. There's a lot of the stuff that was from Legends that actually has not been added up yet. So it's still being worked on. There's still a lot of people who are covering that, and they're still looking into it, but there's still a lot that hasn't been made canon yet. So there's still a whole history behind Mandalore that hasn't been brought up yet. The one thing that I really love that they actually brought forward from the original storyline was the Jedi that was Mandalorian. And I'm going to go into that in a future fact. I'm not going to go into it right now, but we all know this. If you are a fan of the Mandalorian and Rebels and Clone Wars, you found out about the Darksaber that was from the very first Mandalorian Jedi and is at this point the only Mandalorian Jedi. Now we are on track from Ahsoka to get a second Jedi Mandalorian because you've got my brain just from Sabine Wren. Sorry, I literally had to look ahead to my facts because I wanted to go into that. That Sabine Wren is currently being trained by Ahsoka. So there is a chance that Sabine will become the next Jedi Mandalorian. Now, we don't know for sure if there's any more. I mean, obviously, any of you who are a fan of Mandalorian, there is a chance that we could also get a second Mandalorian Jedi through Grogu. Now, he is an apprentice of Mandalore, of the Mandalorian Din Djarin, so he is Din Grogu. But there is a chance that he could become an actual Jedi, depending on what Din decides to do with him, or more to the point, what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni decide to do with him. So there's a whole thing that goes on there. So me personally, I cannot wait for the new stuff that's coming out under Filoni. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next fact now. Next fact, Star Wars fact of the day. Beskar is a metal found only on the planet Mandalore and its moon Concordia. Beskar is the defining material for Mandalorian armor. Alphaba, welcome in. Prized for its durability, it withstands blaster fire and hits from lightsabers. Additional details. Beskar is rare because it's a unique metallic ore, making its supply extremely limited. Centuries of mining, the Empire's seizure of stockpiles during the Great Purge, and the secretive Mandalorian forging techniques all drastically reduced Beskar's availability, forcing most Mandalorians to use weaker alloys for their armor notes. Beskar is heavily culturally significant, primarily used for armor and forged by specialized and highly respected Mandalorian smiths. You meet the armorer in the Mandalorian series, and she is held with great regard and respect by the Mandalorians. Beskar can be formed into various shapes, including plate, mesh, and wire. While it is highly resistant, it is not impervious. It can be damaged by special weapons such as the arc pulse generator developed by Sabine Wren. Yes, that's Sabine Wren from Clan Wren on Mandalore. This weapon was used on a large scale against the Mandalorian clans during the Resistance Wars after the rise of the Empire. You can actually find out about this if you haven't watched Star Wars Rebels. That is where you can find out about this. Tanga, welcome in. In non-canon Legends books, Lady Deadpool, welcome in. Beskar was used, and the reason I said non-canon Legends books is this is technically not canon, but this is really cool, and I wanted to include this fact. Beskar was used to develop armor for specialized Mandalorian Besalook starfighter ships. This was only possible due to a special vein of Beskar being discovered on Mandalore by then planetary leader Boba Fett. Now, good to see you, Lady Deadpool. So, a lot of you may not know this, and there's a reason why, because this is technically not canon anymore, is that in the Legends book, the expanded universe, there was an entire storyline about Boba Fett where he became the leader of Mandalore. He was the one who reunited Marble Muggle, welcome in. He was the one that reunited all of the Mandalorian clans under one leadership. He literally reformed the Mandalorian clans into one organized force. Now, this was really cool because this was the first time we really had a whole aspect of Mandalorian culture, and the fact that Boba Fett, again, was the main target for it. So the fact that he was, one, brought back to life, because everybody thought he died in Return of the Jedi, but then he also came back and he reformed the army of Mandalore. And this whole subject matter of Beskar being used as plate metal on their starships was such a cool thing to actually have brought up. I thought it was super cool, and I absolutely loved the whole concept of it. And the books that you're probably going to want to look up, and you can actually look this up on Wikipedia.com. It's listed under Legends, but there was a invasion that happened in the Star Wars universe in the book series where a species came from outside of the Star Wars galaxy to invade, called the Yuuzhan Vong. And they were the enemies of the Jedi, the New Republic, and they had a technology that basically was organic in nature and was used to basically wipe out half of the galaxy. I mean, it was... there's only one series I could think that actually would emphasize the disaster of this, and that's if you ever watched the series Exo Squad, where basically there was an alien species who basically took over the entire solar system and drove the New Republic basically almost completely off the map until they finally made their stand and developed a technology that would actually allow them to stand up to them. And Boba Fett actually developed this entire fleet of ships that was actually able to not only withstand the enemy's technology, but also was able to be used basically as a battering ram, like kind of like the hammerhead that was used in Rogue One. Basically, these were ships that basically could fly through these vessels without stopping and literally gut them. So it was really cool. It obviously is non-canon now, and I'm guessing that they're probably not going to go into that because they've specified very specifically that the Beskar is primarily used for armor for person. So it's for that aspect. I don't think it was actually used in any way with the ships and stuff like that, because as you could see, a lot of the ships that were used throughout the Clone Wars that were Mandalorian, those guys would easily get shot down and stuff like that. So you get that Beskar is not used for ship design and stuff like that. But they haven't technically shown that, so there is a possibility that it could be something that is brought up. Again, we'll have to wait for Filoni and Jon Favreau to actually make a decision on that. Though I have faith in Favreau that he's going to have some fun with that at some point. I mean, we have Mandalorian Grogu coming out, so there's no telling where it could go from there. Not to mention Ahsoka, and we already know that Sabine Wren is a master technological whiz. User, welcome in. So I'm highly inclined to believe that there's going to be some kind of plot point that's going to be taken on with that. Okay, moving on to the next fact. I believe this will be my last fact. Star Wars fact of the day. Mandalorians were traditionally a warrior culture, but a significant faction championed peace and neutrality. Known as the Pacifist Era, led by Duchess Satine Kryze. You guys should recognize that, the name Kryze. This group chose to withdraw from affairs of the galaxy. So, this part of the history of the Mandalorians is one that you can look up, but let me go into details on this. Mandalorians were regarded as a warrior culture for the majority of its existence on Mandalore. A significant factor came into being after extended contact with the rest of the galaxy. Known as the New Mandalorians, this faction championed peace and neutrality. After centuries of civil war had decimated Mandalore's ecosystem, it was felt that a time for rebuilding was crucial to Mandalorian survival. This group came to power on Mandalore leading up to the start of the Clone Wars era. A sharp ideology divided from 40 BBY to 19 BBY. Now, what I mean by that is they're talking 40 years before the Battle of Yavin. That's what BBY stands for. And you can actually look into this on the Star Wars chronology. Is a lot of the information about distance and time is basically listed by the movies that we run into. So there's Battle of Yavin, Battle of Hoth, Battle of Endor. Those are actually what they actually measure time from. So the period after Return of the Jedi is ABE, which is after Battle of Endor. And BBY is before Battle of Yavin. So there's the before and the after, and they this has been accepted by the way things are done. Now, technically, they haven't shown this in the movies and stuff like that. It's only talked about in a fan basis, but it's done like that in order to make sure people understand the distance of time and how it's traveled in the Star Wars universe. Moving on. This was known as the Pacifist Area, led by Duchess Satine Kryze. This group governed Mandalore and chose to be involved in the affairs of the galaxy by actually joining the Galactic Republic and focusing the government of Mandalore to pacifism, neutrality, and non-violence. During this time period, a peaceful society formed, removing all warrior displays from public view. Reconstruction projects abounded to repair and rebuild the Mandalorian customs. Dome cities were constructed. The traditional armors were put aside except for security and military use. Many traditionalists viewed the peaceful new Mandalorians as traitors to their heritage. Those that viewed this peaceful existence as a betrayal against the way of the Mandalore and their cultural heritage chose exile from the society and were actually forced out politically and a return to warrior traditions. Groups like Death Watch and Children of the Watch chose their own paths until the time came for change. And the majority of these groups moved to the moon of Concordia. Excuse me. I need to take a drink. Goddess, welcome in. So, the time period that we actually find out about a lot of this, if you watched the Star Wars Clone Wars series, a lot of this went into at that point. You find out a lot of history when, if I'm not mistaken, when Obi-Wan and I think Padme goes to Mandalore and they meet with Duchess Satine. Now, you find out through several episodes of Bo-Katan Kryze. Now, she is Duchess Satine's sister. So, Bo-Katan and Duchess Satine Kryze, Bo-Katan Kryze and Duchess Satine Kryze are sisters, but they are also opposites for the Way of Z. Bo-Katan, she believes in the warrior traditions, whereas Satine Kryze, she believes in the non-violent, peaceful, pacifism side. And that was the real interesting aspect of those two that was brought up in the Star Wars Clone Wars series. Me personally, one of my favorite aspects about that was that Duchess Satine had a relationship with Obi-Wan, which, as many of you know, relationships were not accepted by the Jedi. That was one of the things they refrained from. But Obi-Wan still cared deeply for the Duchess Satine. And we see this when Death Watch joins forces with Darth Maul and begins the retaking of Mandalore. And I'm going to go into details on this in a future fact. I'm not going to go into too much details right now. But that's the reason why so many of the traditions did change. But for a long time, and I brought this up in one of my previous facts, Mandalore was not always a warrior culture. That they did follow a peaceful time. That they did go through an actual time where they did not embellish and go through their warrior past. But it was following that and before that that a lot of Mandalorians chose to go on an individual path. Because as we learned in the Mandalorian series, that Mandalorians, once they reach a certain level of their armor and skills, they go out into the galaxy and earn their skills and become either bounty hunters or protectors or something of that sort. And they choose which way they decide to go, where they wanted to be guardians or bounty hunters or something like that. They actually choose which one they're going to be. So that's basically the whole aspect about the Mandalorians, is there's so many different facets that they go into. So that is pretty much, that is my full list. Let me get back up to the beginning. All right, so I'm going to open it up now. So if anybody wants an opportunity to join up and continue this conversation, let me see if I got this up. So I believe I have the invite up now if anybody wants to join the conversation. But if there's anything you guys want to talk about, if you can't join up, post a question or any comments that you might have, any opinions.